Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is OSU Football Update with Jeremie Poplin.
All right, well, a lot to discuss after last night's win over UT Martin, the season opening win for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and we have some injury issues to discuss and an overall level of performance from last night. So let's welcome in John Holcomb, who joins us now here live from the digital studios. John, the title of this podcast should be what?
Well, Zane, you can't get hurt. That would be one way to describe it. By the way, I'm jealous with the headphones, Bob.
Listen, my IFB quit working literally as we were trying to get this thing going. So I know we all have very limited amount of time. So I'm going to rock it radio style right now and wear the old school cans.
I know that you're comfortable in those eminently, so I'm just jealous. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. No, you cannot. Zane Flores, now, it has gone from a quarterback battle that had been described every time someone from OSU, especially Mike Gundy, would describe it as too close to call, to now you cannot afford to have Zane Flores hurt because of Hauss Hejny's situation last night. And it's a shame because Hauss was playing pretty well to start the game and led the Cowboys to 2 straight touchdown drives, made some good throws along with showing off his foot speed, which surprised, I think, one of the faster outside linebackers for the Skyhawks on that first touchdown run. And then all of a sudden they get pinned back deep in their own territory, OSU does, near the end of the first quarter, and they decided to take some deep shots instead of run the ball, try to stretch the defense a little bit. And I think that is where, although we didn't realize it at the time on the broadcast, I think that's where Hauss ended up with the foot injury, which we've been able to confirm is a broken foot, and he'll miss extensive time, and it's a shame.
How did he handle the moment, John, up until the injury? You know, so much can be said of, the lights get turned on, it's the opening game, there's jitters. How are you going to handle the offense? How, in your opinion, did he handle just the Thursday night lights up until that point where he got injured?
He handled it about the way I thought he would, and that's based off of being able to visit with him at media day, just one-on-one, and getting a little more sense of the personality. He does not lack for confidence, but he was polite in the interview and just talking off camera with him to where I didn't detect, an overabundance of cockiness, but just self-confidence. And, he came out and that's the way he performed. There weren't a lot of tentative, bobble a snap. There was a little bit of a timing issue a couple of times when they wanted to run a jet sweep on a handoff, maybe a bobble of a snap once, but beyond that, no, he was very sharp, and he made impressive throws, because I think that's been up until last night, that was the thing that was the biggest question mark with him. You knew he could run. You could outrun people, but also could he throw it well enough when you had to throw it? And the throw he made to Terrell Davis, the UCO transfer, who was really good last night, on that first scoring drive, hitting him a kind of a crossing pattern near the OSU sideline while he's on the move. I mean, that thing was thrown right on the money, and that wasn't the only one that he completed like that.
First time I heard the stat on the postgame last night as I was driving home, scored on the first 2 drives. That's been a while, I believe, since Oklahoma State has scored on the first 2 drives of a game.
Yes, when you're talking about what happened last year, then yeah, it was going to be a little while, and I can't remember the exact stat on that, but I do know that the big plays part, chunk plays, Dave Hunziker, the play-by-play man, did mention that, and I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it. The Cowboys only had 1 big yardage play coming down the stretch of last season, and then they had 2 in the first quarter already. And so I looked at him and I said, well, by my math, I believe that's a 100% improvement. But, I could be wrong. But yeah, they were off to a great start and had their speed overall was giving UT Martin some problems. Although, give the Skyhawks credit, they were able to slow the Cowboys on the run outside of Hejny's touchdown run to start the game. But there was a rhythm to it, and then the field position thing changed. And when you threw it deep and you missed on first and second down going deep, and then Hauss gets hurt on that, it kind of seemed to, now all of a sudden you're kind of reorganizing offensively. And it's not that you were running a lot of different stuff for Zane Flores when he came in, but it just didn't have the same sort of rhythm for a while. And then even then, whenever the Cowboys would connect on a big play, they couldn't sustain it. Like the next play was a lost yardage run or something like that. So those were things that you kind of expect with so many new guys and especially new offensive linemen playing together. Austin Kowecki, who got extensive time last night, did say in the post game that yes, there was some miscommunication on a couple of calls, but he also chalked it up to, look, we've been practicing with these guys, but especially left side of your line with your tackle and your guard, both transfers in late, not getting to campus until basically June. There's some of that can be expected regardless of the level of opposition.
Let's try to stick for just a brief moment timeline-wise. I'm not big on timelines because we've all done this long enough where you just throw out there, hey, 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 7 weeks, however long that it is, and you set a level of expectation, I think, within the fan base. And then if something happens and he doesn't come back, that's even more of a negative aspect. So things can happen. Things happen during rehab. Things happen during procedures. But he is going to miss a rather significant portion of the season from what we know about this injury. So knowing that, what type of confidence do you have with Zane and what you saw from last night in moving forward? And it's not like it gets any easier, John, because walking into Alton, one of the loudest stadiums in college football, with that team that has a high level of expectations placed upon it, he's going to get thrown into the fire rather quickly.
And when you also add to that mix what Oregon failed to do in non-conference play last year, almost getting beaten by Idaho at home, you know that Dan Lanning and his staff had doubled down on, no, we need to come out of the chute smoking. We need to make sure that we are as good as we can possibly be in these early games. Well, okay, then Oklahoma State's offensive line needs to take a step forward a week from Saturday in Eugene to be able to protect Zane. And you also have to put in the mix here, Pop, how aggressive do you get as a play caller in Doug Meacham, knowing that you're going to have to open some things up, show some things that you didn't show against UT Martin, but you can't just leave your quarterback out there in situations where there's a higher risk of him getting hurt because you don't have any experience behind him. The guy with the most experience behind him is actually your slot receiver and returner, Sam Jackson V, who played some quarterback at TCU and played against OSU in Stillwater while he was at TCU. And he's a tremendous athlete and has a decent arm, but he's a receiver right now. They ran one play last night against the Skyhawks where it was basically a kind of an end-around pass, and he got the ball in his hands and threw it. It tried to run that play down, I think, inside the UT Martin 30, so there's less ground for defenders to have to cover, and he just had to kind of eat it and throw it away. But that's where you are. So how aggressive do you get as a play caller? Can you run just enough early in the game to make play action something that's going to be somewhat effective? I mean, that's the biggest question now. Can you block it well up front? Can Zane get his emotions and anxiety or adrenaline, whatever you want to call it, under control in that atmosphere enough to where he's not trying to get out of the pocket early or he's forcing throws or things like that? I mean, and it comes back to, can you run the ball? And Mike Gundy said it again last night. Throughout his tenure, he said, we need to average 4.5 yards a carry. Well, last night it was barely 3, and you give UT Martin some credit. Yes, they put some more people in the box as the game wore on, but you still got to be better with that.
I think, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, but at the beginning of the season, new starting quarterback, I think you're doing a lot of things anyway to try to protect your young signal caller, or at least from a standpoint of not having much seat time. How much of the offense changes between the two quarterbacks, if any at all, in your conversation with the coaches and what you saw from last night? Because it seems like that if an injury is going to happen, it happens early. You're still going to keep some of the same practices as to trying to cater your offense around what the quarterback is doing, but from a protection standpoint, just to get him some positive momentum rolling forward.
In terms of coming into the opener, almost all of the offense, the plays that were run based on, through practices or whatever, with whichever quarterback was in there, the vast majority of the plays were the same. I think you could say that if Hauss was in there, then maybe you throw an extra quarterback run in there, maybe a quarterback sweep, something like that. Now, though, you don't want Flores to run as much because then he's exposed. I mean, the play of the second half, really, because it was a tight game and it was still kind of nervy. The play of that was the 3rd and 8, and you're inside your own 10, and Flores drops back, gets hit initially around the 2-yard line, and manages to escape. Broke like 3 tackles and picked up a first down, ran for 19 yards or whatever it was. But then you couldn't sustain the drive after that. But that showed a little bit of, okay, he's not 10-6 and 100 Hauss Hejny fast, but he was good enough to escape some pressure and turn something into a real positive. Do you see him do that as much, or do you see him, say, a week from Saturday, he gets 5-6 yards, he's told, get down, slide, do that, don't get hit? I mean, and then where does that put you mentally as a quarterback? I mean, I think quarterbacks are more inclined to do that anyway because they're being told, don't get hit, we need you out there.
Yeah.
But what edge can that take away from a guy who, we've heard Clint Shell, former Cowboy quarterback, say this a lot on pregame shows over the last few years, that when he was in there, the one thing he really wanted to have happen early was to get hit. I mean, not to get knocked out of the game, but to get hit, to kind of get your legs under you. I mean, where's the fine line there when you're in the situation they're in right now?
Other bright spots? Wendell Gregory, right? From the type of game that he had, tremendous. And it seems like that there were a couple of those that you could probably point out on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, Gregory was nice last night. I mean, I don't know how many times you describe a football player coming off the edge trying to kill the quarterback as nice. But for a young man, he was at South Carolina, didn't play, and he's got this great size and athleticism. Mike Gundy described him still last night as raw but athletic. To see what he was able to do against the left tackle for UT Martin was pretty impressive, when everybody knew that the guys up front were going to be pinning their ears back and coming after him. And he made one move, and he got the left tackle moving to his left. He went underneath him and then straight at the quarterback, Bauer, and was able to put him on the ground. That was very satisfying. So now I've described Wendell Gregory's play as nice and very satisfying. It's not really football terms, but he was great. The linebackers, to a great degree, were awesome. Brian McCoy Jr. came in from Akron. He was 9th in the country last year in total tackles. And all he did last night was pick up 6 solo stops. You had another transfer linebacker, Brandon Rawls, in there who had 11 stops and 6 solo. So yeah, they made an adjustment, Pop. They early on, UT Martin was leaking backs out of the backfield. And John Gentry was one of them, and made a couple of nice catches. And Gentry was the one who caught the touchdown pass off the double pass. After a couple or 3 times, Todd Grantham, they made sure they made the adjustment, and then even wheel routes, which can burn linebackers because you get a flow going one way and back leaks out the other. They've done that. They covered it well all during preseason camp, and anyone who's played against OSU over the years knows that one way to beat an OSU defense in the past was run the wheel. It'll work. And it did not work for UT Martin last night, and the Cowboys were well aware of it. And you look at the final numbers, yes, the Skyhawks ran it up the middle on the Cowboys early second half when the game was still in the balance, a little more than you would like, but you look at the final stats, and they had 225 total yards.
By the way, the wheel route, I think it's open in the majority of college football, by the way. You could probably yell run the wheel route in any college football game, and it might, for the most part, be open at least 95% of the time. One other item before we get out of here, because we've got an entire week leading up to this Oregon matchup that we'll get more in depth on, and I can't wait to hear from Gundy coming up on Monday as well. But John, in terms of just a clean game, penalties-wise, 2 horse collars? I think that Mike Gundy called out in postgame after that. But outside of that, just 25 yards in penalties besides those 2 horse collars. So, I mean, all things considered, I mean, we've all been a part of games that have been and have gone south quickly in week 1, with just little nagging things here. What was your take on just the cleanliness of the game for the Cowboys from that perspective?
Well, you know, those 2 horse collar tackles were 2 of the 5 penalties on the Cowboys, if I remember right. And you didn't turn it over, you know.
Yep.
No major mistakes. There was only one ball that I can remember that was thrown, maybe should not have been thrown where it was thrown. But Christian Fitzpatrick, the transfer receiver, big 6'4" receiver, was the target on that play, and the safety never left him. He was cheating over on his side, and that ball was thrown in an area where it could have been picked off. But Fitzpatrick made a nice play to break up the potential interception. So you had teammates coming to your rescue if you were Flores on that one, and so I think overall from that standpoint you have to be pretty happy, because it can get really sloppy. The sloppiness really came, I think, in initially, as we just mentioned, letting backs kind of sneak out of the backfield, but really didn't get burned except for the one play on that, and the miscommunication along the offensive line. I think those, and there was 1 or 2 times when the quarterback and receiver weren't on the same page, but it didn't hurt you. So from the cleanliness standpoint, I think you have to be pretty happy if you're Mike Gundy and his staff, especially with the inexperience you were running out there at quarterback.
So what does John Holcomb do on a Saturday free for football during the football season?
I have no idea. It doesn't happen very often. No, I do know what I'm going to be doing this time.
The answer should be nothing.
You're right. You're right. Except, yes, honey, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? You know, so there's going to be some of that on Saturday.
Spoken like a true vet. That's a true vet answer right there.
Listen, it's not my first rodeo. It may be one of my first Saturdays off during the season. This schedule's crazy though, Pop, because this Saturday, then they're off on after the Oregon week, then they're off the following week, and then it's a Friday night game with TU, another Saturday off. I mean, I'm looking around going, is this what retirement's going to look like? Man,
a feller can get used to this, huh?
Yes, you can.
Pretty spectacular. John, great stuff, man. Appreciate you. Like I said, we'll have the entire week to preview this Oregon matchup and find out a little bit more about where the Cowboys stand after all the coaches have had an opportunity to go through and watch all the film. And I've always wanted to say this, but say goodbye, John.
Goodbye, John.
Perfect way to wrap up this Oklahoma State podcast. Remember, check out all of our work, news9.com, news6.com as well, and hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time from the Digital Desk.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma's own Digital Studios sports presentation. Stay with News on 6, online and on television anytime for the latest news, weather, and sports.